The entire restaurant fell silent when my sister Audrey screamed at our grandmother's 75th birthday dinner. Jaws dropped, and eyes widened as she completely lost control, all because I casually mentioned buying a penthouse in Manhattan. For 28 years, Audrey had been the golden child: private school education, luxury trips across Europe, and a brand new BMW for her 19th birthday. Meanwhile, I worked silently building my future with zero support from my family. Nobody saw it coming, especially not my sister, who suddenly realized her unsuccessful brother had surpassed her in every way. Growing up in suburban New Jersey, our family dynamics were established early. My father, Jack, owned a moderately successful construction company that provided us with a comfortable upper-middle-class lifestyle. My mother, Diane, a former pageant contestant, was intensely focused on appearances and social status. My grandmother, Eleanor, my father's mother, was the family matriarch who commanded respect with her quiet dignity. And then there was my sister Audrey, 3 years younger than me, who from her earliest days seemed to captivate my parents in ways I never could. I was 7 when I first recognized the pattern. Audrey, then 4, wanted dance lessons after seeing a ballet on television. Within a week, she was enrolled in the most expensive dance academy in our county, complete with custom-made outfits and private instruction. That same month, I had asked for baseball equipment. After 2 weeks of reminders, my father finally brought home a second-hand glove and bat from a garage sale. "This will do fine for now, Cyrus," he said, ruffling my hair. "We need to be practical with money." The same practicality never seemed to apply to Audrey. While my Little League games often had empty seats where my parents should have been, "Your father has an important client meeting, sweetie," or "Your mother needs to take Audrey shopping for her recital," they never missed a single one of Audrey's dance performances. They would sit in the front row, my father recording every moment, my mother beaming with pride. Our annual family vacation further highlighted the disparity. When I was 10 and Audrey was 7, we took a trip to Florida. The entire itinerary revolved around activities Audrey wanted to do. But I really wanted to go to the Science Museum. I protested when my parents announced we would spend a third day at the princess-themed amusement park instead. "Cyrus, don't be selfish," my mother scolded. "Audrey gets bored at museums, and we want everyone to have fun on this vacation." Everyone, it seemed, meant Audrey. The summer I turned 12 brought the first real turning point in my life. During our annual visit to my grandmother Eleanor's house, she took me aside after dinner while my parents were fawning over Audrey's rendition of a song from her latest recital. "Come with me, Cyrus," she said softly. "I have something for you." In her study, she unlocked an antique wooden box and revealed a collection of gleaming coins nestled in velvet. "These are rare mercury dimes," she explained. "I started collecting them when I was about your age. I want you to have them." I carefully held one up to the light, amazed by its beauty and history. "But why give them to me, Grandma? Shouldn't they go to Dad or Audrey?" She placed her hand on mine, her eyes knowing. "Some treasures grow quietly in the dark, Cyrus. Not everything of value needs to shine brightest at first glance." I didn't fully understand what she meant then, but those coins became my first real possession of value. More importantly, they awakened something in me. That very week, I began researching coin collecting, learning about valuation, rarity, and market demand. By age 14, I had expanded the collection through careful trades, using money earned from mowing lawns and shoveling snow. My parents remained largely oblivious to my growing interest in finance and collecting. They saw my odd jobs as an amusing hobby, never realizing I was methodically saving and investing every dollar. By 15, I had set up a small online business reselling collectible items I would find at garage sales and flea markets. My understanding of value and market demand proved surprisingly accurate, and I consistently turned modest profits. Meanwhile, Audrey continued to absorb our parents' attention and resources. Her dance lessons expanded to include voice training and theater classes. When she struggled in math, they hired an expensive private tutor. When I earned straight A's, my achievements were acknowledged with distracted nods and quick, "Good job." Cyrus' comments before conversations inevitably shifted back to Audrey's world. I learned to find validation elsewhere. My teachers noticed my work ethic and unusual financial aptitude. My baseball coach appreciated my reliability. And in the quiet of my bedroom, I tracked my slowly growing savings account and expanding collection of investments with private satisfaction. I never told my family about the weekend I turned a $100 purchase of vintage baseball cards into a $400 profit. They didn't notice when I stopped asking them for money for school supplies or clothes. And they certainly never suspected that their seemingly ordinary son had started to develop a vision for his future that would eventually change everything. The contrast between Audrey's life and mine became even more pronounced when she turned 14. My parents announced at dinner one night that she had been accepted to Bradford Academy, the most prestigious private school in our area. $40,000 a year is a significant investment, my father admitted. But how can we put a price on Audrey's future? No such deliberations had occurred for my education. I attended Ridgewood Public High School, which was perfectly adequate but lacked the networking opportunities and advanced resources of Bradford Academy. Not that I complained. By then, I had developed a tough skin and a private determination to succeed on my own terms. While Audrey struggled to maintain a B- average despite Bradford's expensive tutoring programs and small class sizes, I threw myself into my studies. I joined the business club, excelled in mathematics and economics, and continued my side hustle buying and selling collectibles online. My bedroom gradually transformed into a miniature office, with price guides, inventory logs, and market trend analyses taped to my walls. During my junior year, I entered the state business competition with a detailed plan for an investment algorithm that could identify undervalued collectibles in niche markets. The project combined my practical experience with the economic theories I'd been studying. When I won first place, my business teacher, Mr. Harrington, was ecstatic. "Your parents must be incredibly proud," he said, as he helped me load my trophy and certificate into his car for a ride home. "Are they coming to the award ceremony next week?" I hesitated before answering. "They have a conflict. My sister has a shopping trip for her spring formal that day." Mr. Harrington's expression shifted to something between confusion and sympathy. "Their loss, Cyrus. What you've accomplished here is exceptional." The awards ceremony came and went without my family present, but something unexpected happened that day. Among the judges was Thomas Reed, the manager of a local investment firm. He approached me afterward. "Your algorithm analysis shows remarkable insight for someone your age," he said, handing me his business card. "We offer part-time positions for promising students. If you're interested, give me a call." That summer before senior year, I began working 20 hours a week at Reed Financial Services. While Audrey toured potential colleges with our parents, I analyzed market trends and assisted with client portfolio management. Mr. Reed quickly recognized that my skills went beyond administrative tasks. "Try building a mock portfolio," he suggested one afternoon, "with a hypothetical $10,000. Let's see what you would do with real investment capital." I spent a week researching, then presented my selections. Mr. Reed implemented them in a small test account. 3 months later, my selections had outperformed the market by 7%. "You have a gift, Cyrus," Mr. Reed said, genuinely impressed. "You see patterns others miss." Meanwhile, at home, the usual family dynamics continued. During one particularly memorable dinner, my parents spent 30 minutes discussing Audrey's social connections at Bradford. The Hendersons' daughter invited Audrey to their lake house, my mother gushed. "They're practically Connecticut royalty." When the conversation finally turned to me, it was perfunctory at best. "How's that little job of yours going?" my father asked between bites. "It's going well," I replied. "Mr. Reed is introducing me to Frank Palmer next week." "Who's Frank Palmer?" my mother asked, already glancing back at Audrey. "Only one of the most successful investment bankers in the Northeast," I said. My father chuckled. "Well, don't get too carried away with those finance dreams, son. Real businesses build real things, like my company. All that Wall Street stuff is just moving money around on paper." The conversation immediately shifted back to Audrey's upcoming dance recital, but I didn't mind. The meeting with Frank Palmer would become another turning point in my life. Frank was in his 50s, sharp-minded and no-nonsense. After observing me analyze several investment opportunities, he took me aside. "You remind me of myself 30 years ago," he said. "Raw talent but without the family connections that open doors in this industry." He paused. "I didn't have those connections either. Had to build everything from scratch. Would you like to know how I did it?" For the remainder of my senior year, Frank became my mentor, meeting with me monthly to discuss investment strategies, market psychology, and educational pathways. When I was named valedictorian of my graduating class, Frank attended the ceremony, sitting in the back row, nodding with approval during my speech. My parents and Audrey arrived late and left early. They had to prepare for Audrey's acceptance celebration. Despite her mediocre grades, she had been admitted to Westmore University, an expensive private college known more for its social scene than academic rigor. My full merit scholarship to the State University's business program warranted only a passing comment from my father. "At least that's one tuition we won't have to worry about." As I watched my family leave my graduation ceremony early, Frank approached and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Their underestimation of you is your greatest advantage," he said quietly. "Use it." My college years at State University were a stark contrast to Audrey's experience at Westmore. While my sister moved into a luxury apartment complex near her campus, complete with pool and concierge service, I settled into a basic dormitory with cinder-block walls and a roommate who snored. Her living arrangements cost our parents nearly $2,000 monthly. My scholarship covered basic housing, and I worked 2 jobs to handle the rest of my expenses. The pattern continued when Audrey turned 19 during her freshman year. My parents surprised her with a brand new Audi, delivered to her apartment with a giant red bow. "She needs reliable transportation," my father explained during one of our infrequent phone calls. "The campus shuttle system just isn't convenient for her schedule." I continued using public buses and occasionally borrowing my roommate's car when I needed to get somewhere inaccessible by public transportation. My time was meticulously scheduled between classes, my job at the university finance office, weekend shifts at a local investment firm, and developing my investment algorithm project that had begun in high school. I chose to major in finance with a minor in computer science, recognizing that the future of investing would be increasingly driven by data analysis and algorithmic trading. While my courses were demanding, I thrived on the practical applications of the theories we studied. My professors noted my unusual combination of technical skill and market intuition. Thanksgiving of my sophomore year highlighted the continuing family dynamic. As we sat around my parents' dining table, they eagerly questioned Audrey about her college experience. "Tell us about your art history class, sweetheart," my mother prompted. "And those spring break plans you mentioned." Audrey launched into a detailed description of her upcoming European tour, which my parents had agreed to finance despite its $15,000 price tag. "Paris, Rome, and Barcelona," she said excitedly. "All the best galleries and museums. It's practically required for my major." When conversation reluctantly turned to me, my father frowned at my description of my practical coursework. "Finance seems so dry, Cyrus," he commented. "Couldn't you have chosen something more creative? You were always good at writing." I didn't bother explaining that my dry finance knowledge had already helped me triple my modest savings through careful investments, or that the algorithm I was developing had potential applications far beyond my personal use. They wouldn't have understood or believed me. The real breakthrough came during my junior year, when Frank Palmer arranged an internship for me at Blackstone Capital, a prestigious investment firm in New York City. I commuted 2 hours each way, 3 days a week, while maintaining my full course load and other jobs. "Your work ethic is remarkable," noted Sandra Jenkins, my supervisor at Blackstone. "Most interns from Ivy League schools don't show half your dedication." The internship provided access to professional-grade financial modeling tools and market data that helped me refine my algorithm substantially. By the end of the semester, I had developed a working prototype that could identify undervalued small-cap stocks with surprising accuracy. Frank encouraged me to present my work at a Young Entrepreneurs Forum in Boston. Among the attendees was Victor Harrington, a venture capitalist known for funding financial technology startups. After my presentation, Victor approached me with unexpected directness. "Your algorithm outperforms similar commercial models I've seen," he said. "Have you considered commercializing it?" When I admitted I'd thought about it, but lacked the capital to launch a business, he handed me his card. "Let's talk next week. I might be interested in providing seed funding." 2 weeks later, I sat in Victor's Boston office, barely able to contain my excitement as he outlined his proposal. "$250,000 for a 20% stake in your venture," he said, "plus mentorship and industry connections." I signed the papers that day, forming Prescient Analytics LLC, with myself as the majority shareholder and CEO. I told no one in my family about this development. Not when I registered the company. Not when I rented a tiny office space near campus. Not even when I hired 2 computer science students to help refine and expand the algorithm's capabilities. While Audrey posted pictures of her sorority formal and weekend getaways on social media, I quietly built the foundation of what would become my future empire. By graduation, Prescient Analytics had secured 3 small investment firms as clients, providing them with market analysis and trading recommendations. I graduated summa cum laude, but unlike my high school graduation, I didn't expect my family to appreciate the achievement. I was right. The ceremony conflicted with Audrey's sorority alumni function, which my parents deemed too important to miss for networking purposes. Frank Palmer attended instead, along with Victor and my small team from Prescient. After the ceremony, we celebrated at a local restaurant where Victor raised a toast. "To Cyrus, who sees what others miss, both in markets and in life. Their oversight is your opportunity." 2 weeks later, I moved to New York City, ready to transform Prescient Analytics from a promising startup into something truly remarkable. All while my family remained completely unaware that the son and brother they had underestimated for so long was no longer just getting by, but beginning to soar. My first apartment in New York was a 500-square-foot studio in a walk-up building in Astoria, Queens. No doorman, no elevator, and a kitchen barely large enough to fit a miniature refrigerator. But the rent allowed me to conserve capital for the business, and the 40-minute commute to my small office in Manhattan gave me time to plan each day meticulously. Those early days at Prescient Analytics defined the meaning of hustle. I worked 80-hour weeks, sleeping on a futon in my office more often than in my apartment. My small team expanded to include a marketing specialist and another developer. All of us crowded into a space designed for half our number. Meanwhile, Audrey graduated from Westmore with a barely earned degree in art history and communications. As her graduation gift, my parents purchased a luxury condo in Philadelphia, where she had secured a position at a gallery through one of my father's client connections. The position was largely ceremonial, allowing her to socialize with wealthy art collectors while drawing a salary disproportionate to her responsibilities. During a holiday gathering at my parents' house that December, Audrey dominated the conversation with stories about the opening gala at her gallery and the important people she'd met. "The Whitmores were there," she told my mother excitedly, "and they loved my suggestions for their collection. They might even take me along to an auction in London next month." When asked about my work, I kept my response deliberately vague. "The financial services business is going well enough, still building our client base." My father nodded distractedly. "Those startup statistics aren't encouraging, you know. Something like 80% fail in the first year. You've got a good degree. You could always get a real job at an established firm if things don't work out." If they only knew. Prescient had just secured its 5th client and was on track to break even before the 18-month mark, an almost unheard-of achievement for a fintech startup. Then came our first major setback. Lockwood Investments, which represented 30% of our revenue, was acquired by a larger firm that used a competitor's analytics platform. They terminated our contract with minimal notice, creating an immediate cash flow crisis. I calculated we needed $50,000 to bridge the gap until we could replace the lost client. Against my better judgment, I called my father to ask for a loan. A loan? For your business? He sounded genuinely confused. Cyrus, you know how I feel about risky ventures. Why don't you just find a normal job like everyone else? Dad, we've been operational for nearly a year and had been profitable until this setback. It's a short-term cash flow issue, not a fundamental business problem. I'm sorry, son. With Audrey's condo maintenance fees and your mother's renovation plans, we're just not in a position to gamble on your hobby business. I hung up, frustrated but not surprised. Later that week, during a family video call to discuss plans for my grandmother's birthday, Audrey didn't hesitate to pour salt in the wound. Maybe you should get a real job like everyone else, Cyrus, she said with a smirk. Not everyone is cut out for business ownership. I bit my tongue, knowing that arguing would accomplish nothing. Instead, I threw myself into solving the problem. I approached smaller clients, offering discounted rates for upfront annual payments. I took a consulting side gig that I worked on during the few hours I normally slept, and I persuaded our small team to accept partial equity compensation in lieu of a portion of their salaries for 3 months. It was during this crisis that the true value of our core algorithm revealed itself. While analyzing market trends to identify potential new clients, the system flagged an anomaly in the renewable energy sector. A small-cap company had developed a breakthrough battery technology that larger market analysts had overlooked. According to our predictive models, the stock was undervalued by at least 300%. I gathered our remaining capital in personal savings, approximately $60,000, and made a calculated bet on this single stock. Frank Palmer thought I was insane. Diversification is the first rule of investment, he warned. You're betting your company's survival on one play. The algorithm has never shown such a strong signal, I insisted. If we're right, this solves everything. If we're wrong. I didn't need to finish the sentence. If we were wrong, prescient analytics would become another startup statistic. 3 weeks later, the battery company announced a partnership with a major automotive manufacturer. The stock jumped 420% in a single day. Our $60,000 investment became over $300,000 overnight. More importantly, the spectacular win caught the attention of several major hedge funds. How did you know? Asked Gerald Winters, managing director at Apex Capital, during our first meeting. Our entire research team missed this play. Proprietary algorithm, I replied with newfound confidence. It sees patterns in market noise that humans typically miss. Within a month, we had signed contracts with 3 hedge funds, each paying more for our services than all our previous clients combined. Prescient Analytics didn't just survive. It underwent a transformation from struggling startup to sought-after financial technology provider. Despite this success, I maintained my modest lifestyle, reinvesting nearly every dollar of profit back into the company. I moved to a slightly better apartment in Brooklyn, but still took the subway to work. I upgraded our office space and hired top talent, focusing on building something sustainable rather than flashy. As our client list grew to include major financial institutions, I continued to keep my success private. My family still thought I was barely making ends meet with my hobby business. Audrey's social media showcased her glamorous gallery events and weekend trips to the Hamptons, creating the illusion that she was the successful sibling. In reality, her lifestyle was funded entirely by our parents, while mine was built on a company now valued at over 8 figures. The contrast between perception and reality came into sharp focus during a phone call with my mother when I was 26. Your sister has been invited to join the museum's Young Patrons Board, she said proudly. It's such an honor. Only the most successful young professionals are considered. That's great, I replied, stepping away from a meeting with Goldman Sachs representatives who were discussing a potential 7-figure contract with Prescient. And, how's your little business doing? Still staying afloat? We're managing, I said simply, watching as my CFO slid the term sheet across the table. Just taking things one day at a time. By my 27th birthday, Prescient Analytics had expanded to 38 employees. Our proprietary trading algorithms were used by 6 of the top 20 hedge funds in the country. A conservative valuation placed the company's worth at over $50 million, making my personal net worth, on paper at least, over $40 million. And still, not a single member of my family had any idea. My mother still sent me birthday checks for $100 to help out. My father still made comments about the importance of job security. And Audrey still treated me with the same dismissive attitude she always had, secure in her belief that she was the family success story. That year, I declined my parents' invitation to Christmas dinner, citing work obligations. The truth was that I'd been invited to spend the holiday at Frank Palmer's estate in Connecticut, where we would be meeting with potential international investors. As I sat in Frank's luxurious dining room, surrounded by people who respected my achievements and valued my insights, I realized I had created a family of choice to replace the one that had never truly seen me. What I didn't realize was that someone had been watching my rise all along, and she was about to change everything. I was in Tokyo, finalizing a partnership with an Asian investment consortium, when I received the call from my father. "Your grandmother is in the hospital," he said, his voice uncharacteristically fragile. "The doctors are saying it's congestive heart failure. You should come home if you can." I canceled the remaining meetings and was on the next flight back to the States. Eleanor had been the only family member who had ever truly seen me, and the thought of losing her was unbearable. When I arrived at the hospital, I found my parents in the waiting room. My father looked older than I remembered, the lines in his face deeper. My mother was flipping through a magazine, occasionally checking her phone. "Where's Audrey?" I asked after greeting them. My mother sighed. "She's trying to get here, but she has this important gallery opening tomorrow. She's seeing if she can rearrange her schedule." In other words, my sister couldn't be bothered to drop everything for the woman who had always been there for us. I bit back my anger and instead asked about grandmother Eleanor's condition. "Stable for now," my father replied. "They're running tests." I spent the next 3 days at the hospital, working remotely from Eleanor's room while she slept. Audrey finally appeared briefly on the second day, staying just long enough to take a tearful selfie for social media before leaving to handle some work emergencies. My parents divided their time between the hospital and home, but I remained constant. On the fourth morning, as I was reviewing quarterly projections on my laptop, Eleanor opened her eyes and smiled weakly. "Always working," she observed. "Building your empire." I set the computer aside immediately. "You should be resting, not talking." She waved her hand dismissively. "I've rested enough. Tell me about your latest conquest in the financial world." I hesitated, surprised. "What do you mean?" Her eyes twinkled despite her frail state. "Did you think I wouldn't keep track of my brilliant grandson?" The Wall Street Journal subscription wasn't just for the crossword puzzles, you know. For the first time, I realized that my grandmother had been following my career all along. The knowledge was both comforting and overwhelming. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. "It wasn't my place," she replied. "You chose to keep your success private, and I respected that decision. But I've always seen you, Cyrus. Always." We talked for hours, me sharing details about prescient analytics that I had never told anyone in the family, and her listening with genuine interest and pride. As our conversation wound down, she fixed me with a serious look. "It's time to stop hiding your light," she said firmly. "Not for their validation, but for your own peace. Secrets require energy to maintain, energy better spent elsewhere." I promised to consider her words, and over the next few weeks, as she recovered and returned home, the seed she had planted began to grow. The catalyst came 2 months later during a family dinner. Audrey announced her engagement to Tyler Williams, the son of a prominent Philadelphia family. "We're thinking June at the Williams estate," she gushed. "Only about 300 guests, very intimate." My mother was ecstatic. My father looked pleased but slightly concerned, and I immediately understood why. A wedding of that scale would be extremely expensive, even by my sister's extravagant standards. After dinner, as my mother and Audrey discussed flower arrangements, I found my father in his study, reviewing papers with a furrowed brow. "Everything okay, Dad?" I asked. He quickly shuffled the papers into a folder. "Just some business matters. Nothing for you to worry about." but I had caught a glimpse of a second mortgage application before he hid it away. My parents were planning to take out a loan against their home to pay for Audrey's dream wedding. The construction business has been slower since the recession, he admitted when I pressed him, but we'll manage. We always do. Dad, if you need financial help, I could. He cut me off with a sharp wave. Absolutely not. I've built this business from nothing, provided for this family for 30 years. I don't need handouts, especially not from my son, who's still trying to get his own business off the ground. His pride was as immovable as ever, but now it threatened his financial security. I left the conversation frustrated, but determined to find another solution. That opportunity came the following week at another family dinner. Audrey was detailing her wedding plans, which now included flying in a specific florist from Holland and custom-designed tableware. The budget has grown a bit, she admitted without a trace of concern. But it's only once in a lifetime, right? I couldn't stay silent any longer. Have you and Tyler considered contributing to the wedding costs, given that you're both working adults? The table fell silent. Audrey looked at me, as if I'd suggested she get married in a fast food restaurant. Why would we do that? She asked incredulously. Dad always said he'd pay for my wedding. It's tradition. Traditions can adapt to circumstances, I replied evenly. Dad's business has been affected by the recession. Taking out a second mortgage to fund an extravagant wedding seems unwise. My father's face reddened. You had no right to look at my private papers, Cyrus. I didn't need to look closely. I know what a second mortgage application looks like. My mother intervened, her voice tight. Cyrus, I think you're just jealous that your sister is reaching these beautiful milestones while you're still struggling with your startup thing. Audrey nodded in agreement. Exactly. Some of us have built successful lives and relationships. Not everyone can say the same. My startup thing is doing fine, I said, trying to keep my voice level. My father snorted. If it was doing so well, you wouldn't be living in that tiny Brooklyn apartment. Real success leaves evidence, son. Audrey twisted the knife. No one has even heard of your company, Cyrus. At least be honest about your failures. I almost revealed everything then and there, but something held me back. This wasn't the right moment or the right reason. Revealing my success out of anger would only create more division. Instead, I excused myself early and drove directly to my grandmother's house. Eleanor listened patiently as I recounted the dinner disaster. They'll never see me for who I am, I concluded bitterly. Why should I even care anymore? She took my hand in hers, her grip surprisingly strong for someone who had been seriously ill just weeks before. You care because they're family, flawed as they are, she said. But Cyrus, it's time to stop hiding your light. Not to prove them wrong, but because living a divided life is exhausting. So what do you suggest? Show up to the next dinner in a Maserati? She chuckled. Nothing so crass. But my 75th birthday is next month. The whole family will be there. Perhaps that's the right moment for the truth to come out naturally. As I drove back to New York that night, I made a decision. Grandmother Eleanor was right. It was time for the truth, delivered not as a weapon but as a simple fact. The final push came when I learned something interesting through business channels. Audrey and her fiancé Tyler had applied to lease a unit at the Monarch, the most prestigious residential building in Manhattan. They had been rejected due to insufficient income verification, despite listing my parents as guarantors. The Monarch happened to be a property I had been eyeing for investment purposes. The penthouse was currently available, and my real estate broker had been encouraging me to consider it. The synchronicity felt like the universe sending a message. 2 days later, I signed the purchase agreement for the penthouse at the Monarch. The 8-figure transaction would be finalized just before my grandmother's birthday dinner. The stage was set for a revelation that would forever change our family dynamics. What I couldn't predict was just how dramatic that change would be. The evening of my grandmother's 75th birthday arrived, crisp and clear. She had requested a private dinner at Bellini's, an upscale Italian restaurant in downtown Princeton that had been a family favorite for special occasions. As I parked my modest rental car, I had flown in from New York and decided against arriving in anything flashy. I took a moment to prepare myself for what would likely be a pivotal evening. Inside, I found the family gathered in a private dining room. My grandmother sat at the head of the table, elegant in a blue dress that brought out her eyes. My parents flanked her on either side, with Audrey and her fiancé Tyler next to my mother. My father's sister, Aunt Patricia, sat beside an empty chair clearly meant for me. Patricia had always been the family truth-teller, her straightforward nature, a counter to my mother's social climbing and my father's pride. Cyrus. My grandmother's face lit up as I entered. Now we're complete. The dinner began pleasantly enough, with wine being poured and appetizers served as my grandmother received her gifts. I had arranged for a rare first edition of her favorite novel to be delivered earlier that day, a gift that had brought tears to her eyes according to my father. Predictably, Audrey dominated the conversation, alternating between wedding plans and complaints about her professional life. The gallery owner just doesn't understand my vision for the modern exhibition, she sighed dramatically. And the condo board in Philadelphia is being completely unreasonable about our renovation requests. Tyler and I are seriously considering relocating to New York. But the application process at the Monarch was such a nightmare. At the mention of the Monarch, my grandmother caught my eye and raised an eyebrow slightly. I gave her an almost imperceptible nod. The real estate market in New York is particularly challenging right now, Tyler added, clearly trying to save face. Even with excellent credentials, the luxury buildings have ridiculous requirements. My mother patted Audrey's hand sympathetically. You'll find something perfect, sweetheart. You always do. The conversation continued in this vein through the main course, with my parents and Audrey seemingly engaged in a competition to outdo each other with stories of status and exclusivity. Aunt Patricia occasionally rolled her eyes in my direction, her expression making it clear she found the whole performance exhausting. Finally, as dessert was being served, my grandmother strategically created the opening I'd been waiting for. Cyrus, she said, her voice cutting through Audrey's monologue about honeymoon destinations, you've been so quiet tonight. Tell us about your life in New York. How is your apartment? Still in Brooklyn, isn't it? All eyes turned to me, most with the expectation that my response would be brief and unremarkable, before attention could return to more interesting family members. Actually, I replied casually, I'm moving. Signed the papers last week. Oh? My mother's interest was perfunctory at best. Found another place in Brooklyn? Manhattan, actually, I said, taking a sip of water. I bought the penthouse at the Monarch. The silence that followed was absolute. My father's fork paused halfway to his mouth. My mother's smile froze. Tyler looked confused. And Audrey. Audrey's face went through a rapid series of expressions. Confusion, disbelief, and then something darker. That's not funny, Cyrus, she finally said, her voice tight. The Monarch rejected our application even with Mom and Dad as guarantors. There's no way you could afford the penthouse there. I shrugged. The closing is next week, if you'd like to see the paperwork. This is ridiculous, Audrey's voice rose sharply. You're lying. Nobody like you could afford that building. The penthouse must cost at least $15 million. 18.5, actually, I corrected gently. But it has excellent views of the park. Audrey's face flushed crimson. This isn't possible. You live in a crappy apartment in Brooklyn. Your company is just some tiny startup nobody's heard of. My father finally found his voice. Cyrus, what exactly is going on here? Is this some kind of joke? Before I could answer, Aunt Patricia was already typing on her phone. She had always been the most technologically savvy of her generation in our family. Prescient analytics, she read from her screen, looking up at me with newfound respect. Founded by Cyrus Miller, age 28. Specializing in proprietary financial algorithms and predictive market analysis. Current clients include 6 of the top 20 hedge funds in North America and Asia. She turned her phone around to reveal the Fortune magazine profile I had reluctantly agreed to for our investors' sake. The headline read, The Invisible Billionaire, How Cyrus Miller Built a Financial Empire Without Anyone Noticing. Current company valuation, Aunt Patricia continued, clearly enjoying herself now, estimated at over $200 million. My father dropped his fork with a loud clatter. My mother turned pale. And then, Audrey lost it completely. "This is a lie!" she screamed, causing nearby diners to turn and stare. "All of it! You've been helping him in secret, haven't you?" She glared at our parents. "You gave him money while pretending to support me. This whole time, behind my back." "Audrey, please," my mother whispered, mortified by the scene. "We had no idea. How could you possibly afford that penthouse?" Audrey demanded, turning back to me. "You must have done something illegal. There's no other explanation." "I built a company," I replied calmly. "The same hobby business you've all been dismissing for years. Turns out it's quite successful." Audrey knocked over her wine glass, sending red liquid spreading across the white tablecloth. "No, this isn't happening. You can't just show up and suddenly be more successful than me. That's not how this family works." Tyler placed a restraining hand on her arm, which she immediately shook off. "You've always been jealous of me," she accused. "Always in the background, always the afterthought. And now you're making up this ridiculous story to steal attention on Grandma's birthday. How pathetic can you be?" It was at that moment that Aunt Patricia, who had continued scrolling through articles about me and prescient analytics, delivered the line that brought the room to a complete standstill. "Maybe if you'd noticed Cyrus's potential instead of treating him like Audrey's understudy, you'd have known your son is now worth more than everyone in this room combined." The bluntness of her statement hung in the air like a thunderclap. My grandmother reached across the table and squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with pride. My father stared at me, as if seeing me for the first time. "Is this true? All of it?" I nodded. "I've built prescient analytics over the past 8 years, starting with the algorithm I developed in college. We now employ 47 people and have offices in New York, London, and Tokyo." "But why keep it secret?" my mother asked, her voice small. "Why let us think you were struggling all this time?" I took a deep breath. At first, it was because I needed to prove to myself that I could succeed on my own terms. Later, when it became clear that you'd formed your opinions about me and Audrey, it just seemed easier to maintain the status quo. You were happy believing what you wanted to believe. "So, this whole time," my father said slowly, "while we've been worried about you making ends meet, you've been a millionaire?" "The article says billionaire, Jack," Aunt Patricia corrected, not bothering to hide her amusement. "Pay attention." "On paper at least," I acknowledged. "Most of my worth is tied to the company's valuation." Audrey had gone from screaming to a cold, trembling silence that seemed somehow more concerning. "I don't believe any of this," she said finally. "Show me proof, right now." I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and slid it across the table to her. Her eyes widened as she saw the balance in just one of my accounts. Tyler, peering over her shoulder, let out a low whistle. "That's a lot of zeros." Audrey shoved the phone away, as if it had burned her. "This doesn't change anything," she insisted, though her voice wavered. "Money isn't everything. I'm still the one with the meaningful relationships, the social connections, the empty gallery job your father arranged," Aunt Patricia interjected. "The lifestyle funded entirely by your parents? Those social connections that wouldn't exist without your family's checkbook?" "Patricia, please," my mother protested weakly. "No, Diane. I've watched this family dynamic for too long," Aunt Patricia replied firmly. "You and Jack created this situation by putting Audrey on a pedestal while ignoring Cyrus's potential. Well, look where that's gotten you. Your son is a self-made success who never needed your help, and your daughter is having a meltdown in a public restaurant because she's just discovered she's not actually the star of this family." Audrey abruptly stood up, tears streaming down her face. "I don't have to listen to this. Tyler, we're leaving." As she grabbed her purse and stormed toward the exit, Tyler hesitated, looking between her retreating figure and the rest of us still seated at the table. "I should probably." He gestured vaguely toward Audrey before offering an apologetic smile and hurrying after her. In their absence, a heavy silence descended on the table. My grandmother, who had watched the entire scene unfold with surprising serenity, finally spoke. "Well," she said, raising her champagne glass, "I don't think I've had this exciting a birthday since my 40th, when your grandfather forgot to mention he'd invited his ex-wife to the party." The unexpected comment broke the tension, and even my parents managed weak smiles. "To Cyrus," my grandmother continued, her eyes meeting mine, "who has proven that success comes in many forms, and often to those patient enough to wait for the right moment to shine." As the others raised their glasses in a somewhat shell-shocked toast, I realized that everything had changed. The carefully maintained family mythology had crumbled in a single evening, and what would rise from its ashes remained to be seen. The days following my grandmother's birthday dinner were tense and awkward. Audrey refused to speak to anyone in the family except Tyler, who found himself in the uncomfortable position of mediator. My parents seemed to exist in a state of stunned recalibration, trying to process how thoroughly they had misunderstood their own son. 3 days after the dinner, my father called and asked if we could meet. I suggested breakfast at a quiet cafe near my hotel in Princeton, where I was staying to spend more time with my grandmother before returning to New York. He arrived looking tired, the confident construction company owner, replaced by a man grappling with serious regret. After ordering coffee, he sat across from me, hands folded on the table. "I've been trying to figure out what to say," he began. "How do you apologize for failing to see your own son for decades?" "Dad, you didn't fail." He held up a hand. "Let me finish, please. This is important." He took a deep breath. "Your mother and I, we got it wrong, Cyrus. From the beginning, we focused so much attention on Audrey that we made her the center of our family narrative. She was outgoing, demanding, and frankly easier to understand than you were. I was quiet," I acknowledged. "I didn't ask for much." "That's just it," he said, pain evident in his expression. "You shouldn't have had to ask. We should have seen you, your potential, your needs. Instead, we created a dynamic where Audrey expected everything and you expected nothing. I can see now how deeply unfair that was." He stared into his coffee cup. "I was so proud of building my business from scratch, of being self-made. And here you've done exactly that, on a scale I couldn't have imagined, while I was dismissing your efforts as a hobby." For the first time in my adult life, I saw my father vulnerable, his carefully maintained facade of paternal authority stripped away. "I didn't build Prescient to prove you wrong, Dad," I said quietly. "I did it because I loved the work. The validation was secondary." "That's even worse," he replied with a sad smile. "You weren't even trying to show us up, yet you surpassed anything we could have dreamed for you." We talked for nearly 3 hours that morning. He asked thoughtful questions about my business, actually listening to the answers. He shared his concerns about his construction company, which had been struggling more than he'd admitted. And finally, he asked the question that clearly weighed on him most. "Can you forgive us, Cyrus? For all the years we didn't see you?" I considered the question carefully. "I think forgiveness is a process, not an event. I'm willing to start that process, if you are." He nodded, relief visible in his expression. "That's more than fair." My mother requested her own conversation the following day. We met at my grandmother's house, sitting in the garden where she had always felt most comfortable. "I don't know where to begin," she said, nervously adjusting her scarf. "Your father was right. We failed you." "Mom, I've turned out fine," I assured her. "Better than fine, actually." "But at what cost?" she asked, her eyes welling with tears. "How lonely you must have been, carrying your successes and struggles alone all these years." I hadn't expected this perspective from my mother, who had always seemed more concerned with appearances than emotions. "I had some support," I told her. "Grandma Eleanor, my mentor Frank, some key colleagues who became friends. But yes, there were times I wished I could share things with you and Dad." She wiped her eyes. "I need to confess something. I favored Audrey because she was like me. I was the pretty, popular girl who peaked in high school. I never developed real skills or independence. When I met your father, I latched onto his ambition because I had none of my own. This level of self-awareness surprised me." "Mom." "No, please let me finish," she insisted. I saw myself in Audrey, and I saw your father in you. Quiet, determined, brilliant in ways I didn't understand. I think, subconsciously, I was afraid you wouldn't need me the way Audrey did. So I poured everything into her, making sure she would stay dependent on us. That's remarkably honest, I said, genuinely moved by her vulnerability. Your grandmother helped me see it, she admitted. We had a long talk yesterday. She has a way of making you face uncomfortable truths. We sat in silence for a moment before she spoke again. I want to do better, Cyrus. I want to know my son, the man you've become while I wasn't paying attention, if you'll let me. I'd like that, I replied, and meant it. Audrey proved to be the most difficult reconciliation. For 2 weeks, she refused my calls and ignored my messages. Finally, my grandmother intervened, inviting her to tea with the explicit instruction that she stop behaving like a spoiled child and face the music. When I arrived at Eleanor's house, Audrey was already there, sitting stiffly on the edge of the sofa. She looked smaller somehow, her usual confidence diminished. I'll leave you two to talk, my grandmother said after serving tea. Try not to break anything expensive. After she left, Audrey and I sat in uncomfortable silence until I decided to break the ice. How are the wedding plans coming along? She gave me a sharp look. Is that supposed to be funny? Asking about my wedding when you know Dad can't afford what we'd planned? Actually, I was genuinely asking, I replied calmly. I care about your happiness, Audrey, despite what you might think. She set down her teacup with excessive precision. You know what the worst part of all this is? Everyone thinks I'm the villain in this story. The spoiled princess who got everything handed to her while the hard-working brother struggled in silence. But I never asked to be the favorite. I know that, I acknowledged. You were a child. We both were. Neither of us created the dynamic, but we both played the roles we were given. Easy for you to say now that you've won, she said bitterly. This isn't about winning or losing, I countered. It's about breaking a pattern that wasn't serving any of us, including you. What do you mean? Including me. I leaned forward. Think about it, Audrey. All these years, you've been trained to believe your value comes from what others give you or do for you. Your expensive education, your gallery job arranged by Dad, your lifestyle funded by our parents. Has any major achievement in your life been entirely your own? Her face flushed with anger, but I could see my words finding their mark. That's not fair, isn't it? I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying it because you're capable of so much more than being the family princess. You're smart, creative, and determined when you want something. What could you accomplish if you channeled that energy into creating something of your own? She was quiet for a long time, staring into her tea, as if it might contain answers. Finally, she looked up with tears in her eyes. I don't know who I am without being the star, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. That's what terrifies me about all this. If I'm not the successful one, the special one, then what am I? In that moment, I saw my sister clearly, for perhaps the first time, not as the favored golden child or the spoiled princess, but as someone just as trapped by our family dynamic as I had been. You're Audrey, I said simply, and you get to decide what that means now. Our conversation lasted hours, moving from anger to grief to cautious hope. By the end, we hadn't resolved everything, but we had begun to see each other as allies rather than adversaries in the process of redefining our family. In the months that followed, remarkable transformations took place. My father finally admitted his business was in serious financial trouble. Rather than offering a bailout, I proposed a partnership. Prescient Analytics would invest in modernizing his construction company's operations in exchange for equity, preserving his pride while providing the capital he needed. My mother discovered a passion for garden design and enrolled in courses at the local community college, developing skills and confidence that reduced her obsession with status and appearances. Most surprisingly, Audrey and Tyler decided to scale back their wedding plans dramatically. We're paying for it ourselves, she told me during a lunch in New York. It won't be as extravagant, but it will be ours. She had also resigned from her gallery position and was taking business courses, with plans to open her own art consultancy focused on emerging artists. I'm terrified, she admitted, but also excited to see what I can do on my own terms. My grandmother Eleanor's health improved steadily, as if the resolution of family tensions had provided healing beyond what medicine could offer. During a family dinner at my new penthouse, she raised a toast that brought tears to everyone's eyes. "To seeing people for who they truly are," she said, looking around at each of us. "Not who we expect them to be or who we've decided they are, but their authentic selves in all their complexity. May we always offer each other that gift." As I looked around at my family, transformed by truth and willing to grow through discomfort, I realized that my success had given me something far more valuable than financial security or professional acclaim. It had created the opportunity for genuine connection with the people who, despite their flaws and mistakes, had shaped my life. The journey had taught me that true success isn't measured by account balances or prestigious addresses, though those are pleasant side effects. Real success is the freedom to define your worth on your own terms, the courage to stand in your truth even when others don't see it, and the wisdom to forgive those who failed to see your light before it became too bright to ignore. In the end, the greatest achievement isn't proving others wrong. It's discovering you never needed their validation in the first place, then extending compassion to those who withheld it out of their own limitations. That's the kind of success that compounds over a lifetime, paying dividends in relationships healed and perspectives transformed. Have you ever had to stand in your truth when others didn't see your potential? Or forgiven someone who didn't believe in you until you'd already succeeded? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like it, subscribe to hear more stories, and share it with someone who might need this message today. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the greatest growth happens in the dark, when no one is watching.